Hi, my name is John Slattery. I'm the Executive Director of the Grefenstette Center for Ethics here at Duquesne University, and you're about to watch our virtual roundtable on the future of humanities in a world of AI. This event highlights the work of our Faculty Scholars program over the last academic year, which is a national group of researchers at the intersection of faith, ethics, and technology. Please visit our website to find out more information on this program or to join our mailing list. I'd now like to introduce the first speaker of the program, Dr. Jody Hunt, the Executive Director of the Neuhoff Institute of Evangelization at the University of Dallas.
Sure, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, everyone, and I'm happy to see some familiar names, I think, that I'm coming across the screen. Um, my particular sort of area is going to be bridged out and fleshed out by other faculty scholars, so I'm going to be quite brief, and so not to step on anyone else's territory and areas that they're covering. And of course, we can have more conversation in the breakout room. But one of the things that I kind of start with is why humanities must incorporate AI to survive. And it sounds kind of odd from someone from the University of Dallas because we are a humanities school. We are a liberal arts education. In fact, when AI became really big in the last couple of 3 years, and it really exploded, we've had a lot of conversations here and among our faculty and rejecting this idea of using AI at all. And we've become sort of like putting it in our where do we put it in the handbook that says like you can't do it, you can't touch it, you don't look at it, and how do we go back to paper as we consider ourselves a brick and mortar institution only, even though we do some digital stuff. But as I began to think about this, I was like, well, and I kind of go back and thinking these conversations in America, especially that's been happening in terms of our humanity programs are shrinking. And we know the headlines. You see them all over the place. There's not enough enrollment. There's no longer people showing up to, our programs are closing. And as a theologian, I've seen this too, as I find colleagues losing positions and places you never thought would lose theology departments, even at Catholic universities. And so as I began to think about this, I remember I kind of went back a little bit in history. First, I want to say like this is not new to us in the humanities. In 1917, almost 100 years ago, there was a German scholar named Max Weber. Some of you may have heard of this famous lecture he gave called Science as a Vocation. And he was asked to talk about the humanities and what does it look like to work in academia? And in 1917, Max Weber was saying these same things. In fact, in his own quotes, he called academia becoming a capital intensive, bureaucratically organized enterprise, and that the situation is dire and the humanities are dying and there's no place for a scholar and we have all these issues. And that was 100 years ago. So we've been here before, and yet here we are still standing. So I think that's really important. One thing that Max Weber said in that particular discourse, as he went back to this, well, what's the reason for humanities? And that's where I landed in sort of fleshing out this idea of the humanities and why AI is so important to us. And he landed on the importance of scholarly work leads to wonder. So, in order to engage in this idea of wonder and make meaning of this life around us, we need to have really good scholarly work. As a Catholic theologian, I kind of went back to St. Augustine. I said, well, he kind of says the same thing, but instead of starting with scholarly work, Augustine begins with wonder. And so Augustine says that we need to study. So when you open the scriptures, you look at this and you study it and you flesh it out, but you begin with a sense of awe and wonder and just allow the Spirit to move you, and then you will be guided to scholarly work. So starting from there, I began to think about the humanities and thinking about, well, okay, like how can AI kind of fit into this and save us and get us and I think AI can reorient us back to that age of wonder in some way. I just caught this recent article that was published just a few days before we gathered today by Dr. Graham Burnett. You may have seen it in the New Yorker. And he asked the question, will the humanities survive AI? And really, he began to say that we can't ignore humanities, and that's sort of like this where I sort of fell into. We can't just ignore the place of humanities. We can't ignore AI. AI is going to exist whether or not we allow it into our spaces. And if we continue to ignore it, we may fall into this cultural discourse that we no longer prepare our students or the people around us for a world of AI. And so we have to be open to it. But he says at the same time, at the very end, he ends with like, we have AI and that's reserved for very specific things. And he says that the greatest gift to humanities is the archival nature of AI, that we can dive into archives and have this collaborative experience that we may not have had before. But then he kind of goes into this idea at the end. He goes, but by the way, AI is not humanity. And I think you'll hear a lot of that later on from other faculty scholars who kind of talk about this. It's like we are the human persons, and what we bring into AI, that ethical sense is really important. So kind of just ending now in sort of in this discourse, and as how is AI? So how can AI? I don't see AI as the savior of the humanities. As I said at the beginning of my statement, I think humanities were going to be around regardless. I think AI has placed a lens on very important parts of humanities like psychology and sociology and Christian anthropology, or the human anthropology that we see about who we are as human persons. Philosophy, when we talk about ethics, I think AI has opened up our world to those conversations in a new and different way, which is really exciting for. But is that going to save us? I don't think we need saving in that way. But at the same time, I kind of fall into like this idea that I think AI could be a very good interdisciplinary partner. And what I mean by that is that there's this intersection of the humanities with AI, that I see that if humanities are really going to survive this tech age and come out the other side stronger than ever before, and I think we're at a really good opportunity that we're going to be, we have to engage in AI and look at them as a partner, as a collaborator, as a tool that we could use in our classrooms, in our conversations, us engaging and informing the different systems, and ethically informing the systems to create algorithms around this. And so that we become almost a check and balance to AI. We become a sense of a way of correcting when it goes awry and doing different types of things. So no, AI is not the savior in a sense of humanities. Humanities, I don't think, needs saving because we go through these ebb and flows. We survived the 100-year dire state that Max Weber described, and we're still here. But I think there's a great opportunity that we could be growing and expanding, and be taken more serious in our culture if we kind of gravitate toward AI and use it as a tool within our different spaces. So with that, I'll hand it off to my other colleagues. So I'll probably flesh out a lot of the other points that I started with.
All right, thank you so much. That was a fantastic way to begin. So next, I want to bring in Brianne Jacobs, who is an assistant professor of theology and religious studies and coordinator of the Women and Gender Studies program at Emmanuel College, and she will be defending a technology-free classroom. So take it away, Brianne.
Hi, welcome everyone. I am indeed taking this position, and I take it literally in my classroom as well. What I say to my students is that humanities and what I teach in the classroom, right, is ultimately the freedom to think for oneself. That's the whole point. The idea is to take a stand about something that you think. And in my opinion, writing is thinking, right? We've got like the inchoate thoughts that we have going on in our mind all the time. And then they have to get a little bit sharper when we're in conversation with each other, when we receive pushback from other people. And the hardest, or one of the hardest forms of thinking is writing. When you really ask yourself, what do I think about this? To write a thesis, to take a stand. And in writing, in putting down your own thoughts, you come to your own thoughts about things, right? And it's not to say that everything you write down is your eternal written in stone feeling about something or thought about something. But rather that in order to think, you have to be speaking and, interlocution, getting pushed back upon, and writing, right? You can't turn that over to something else and then refine upon it and then find yourself in that process. You have to do the existential thing of looking at the empty, the great infinite spaces of the empty page and putting down your own thoughts. And I've had the experience so many times, as I'm sure many of you have, of students saying to me, oh, I have it all in my head. and I'm just going to write it down. And then they get to that thing of writing it down and they realize, no, I don't have it all. As soon as I begin to put it into writing, I realize the flaws and the contradictions and the places in which I need nuance or roundness. And so I keep AI out of the classroom because I feel that that's the only way for students to take a stand and discover who they are and have the freedom really to think for themselves. Um, I liken it in some ways to a gym, which is a metaphor I don't love, but you have to get in there and do it. It is through the exercise of writing, it is through the exercise of dialogue that you begin to develop your own critical analysis and stands on issues. You put on ideas and sort them out, and then maybe you realize that it's not what you think, but it's only through the process of doing that that you are then able to become in some ways, right? To have the freedom to think your own thoughts and to have your own positions on things as you build through what you've read and your classmates, and then of course finally in your own writing. So I would defend a AI-free classroom. I think then, some might argue that you need to use AI in order to become good at it. I'm sure that's true, but I think ultimately the way to become very proficient in the use of LLMs in particular, both the crafting of prompts and the editing of things that it generates, is to spend the time learning how to write yourself and is taking a stand yourself in what you think so that you know what you think before some LLM regurgitates some ideas for you to then refine. So I would defend an AI-free classroom.
All right, thanks so much. That was fantastic, and we'll just keep moving forward. Next is Wes King, and they are an assistant teaching professor at University of Washington Information School. And Wes will be defending the collaboration with AI in teaching practices.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here with all of y'all. As an assistant teaching professor in information science, I often get asked the question, what is information science? And I actually teach a research methods class where I talk about a lot of different disciplines. And our information school has faculty from multiple academic disciplinary perspectives, including the humanities, social sciences, the natural sciences, formal sciences, as well as faculty from library and technology professions. Now, my research is at the intersection of religion, gender, and technology, and I primarily teach undergraduate courses, including an intellectual foundations of information course, as well as courses on gender, race, and information, and an elective on AI, robots, and religion, which is one of my favorite courses to teach. And the importance of AI in education in the information school is, almost to some degree self-evident. And so for me, I'm thinking about like, where does the humanities fit in some of these more technical, either whether it's computer science or information science, where does the humanities fit and why do we need the humanities? AI, students are using AI, whether we allow it in the classroom or not, they are using it. And I had a student in my, introductory intellectual foundations course ask, why do faculty still create assignments that are easy to answer with Gen AI? And, so this kind of, what am I here for? And if I can get this information elsewhere. And I think this raises a lot of questions about what even is education for, right? What is the classroom for? And I agree with so much of what Brianne has said, and also I think that there are a lot of ways that we can collaborate with using AI in the classroom that can achieve some of those goals, as well as support learners that maybe are still figuring some of those things out. Now, when we think of pedagogy and kind of this, unidirectional transfer of information, knowledge, content with the teacher as a disseminator, AI kind of fills that role in some ways, right? It's very unidirectional, and it is the like expert, the disseminator of this information. And as educators of adults, right, uh, that approach, could be replaced by AI in some ways. But collaborating with AI in the classroom kind of builds upon this multi-directional transfer and co-construction of knowledge with the teacher as a facilitator. And so the teacher as a facilitator is bringing the students in as producers of knowledge, that they have knowledge to contribute to the learning experiences. And we also see that in so many of these, computer science programs, as well as information science programs, there is a growing need, as well as kind of a growing impetus to bring in courses on ethics. And how can we even teach ethics of AI without the humanities? We need to draw upon history. We need to draw upon philosophy and cultural studies that inform our ethical approaches. And I think the richness of the humanities, and this is, one of the reasons I'm excited that, humanities are engaging with AI, right, in order to be able to then continue to foster, I think, as Jody said, these interdisciplinary efforts that will help us to form and shape students and help them to become those critical thinkers that are able to engage with these kind of multiplicities of knowledges and ways of knowing. And I think that's really one of the big things. I teach a research methods class on how we come to know what we know. And those are big questions. Epistemology, like how do we know what we know? How do we find these answers? And, for many students, they have a very simplistic understanding of that, and they think that AI can answer so many of those questions. And so giving them opportunities to collaborate with AI in the classroom can help them, kind of explore and understand, so many of these differences. And so I'm thinking with something that, my colleague here, David Witter, talked about in his research of how, AI developers, right, are going through these different phases, and these new kind of advances come out, and oftentimes they'll exploit these technologies or these advances in knowledge. And I think that's sometimes where students are at, right? They're wanting to exploit these technologies to, help give them an advantage. And if we're looking at that, their only goal is to like achieve a degree and to get a job, right? That they're in this exploit mode with these technologies. But if we help them to see, this opportunity to explore and to use these tools to explore, then that might make a big difference in how the development of these tools, but more importantly, the development of students. As collaborating with AI in the classroom, we get to teach them. And I use I have an activity that I use with my students and in my research methods course that kind of helps them to see some of these things, right? Collaborating with AI in classroom can help them to learn, like, how do I check if this information is correct or not? Um, what I do is I have 5 different generative AI tools. They all enter the same prompts, and then they compare the output across those prompts. And then we have a conversation about like which generative AI tool gave out which kind of information. And I use critical cultural theories and critical approaches to research. So we look at Black feminist theory and intersectionality, queer theory, and gender studies. And then we look at CRIP theory and critical disability studies and kind of see, what are we learning from these systems? And can we learn what we need to know about these approaches by just using one tool? Or do we need to be in conversation? And so I think teaching critical thinking, we can use these tools in ways that do support teaching critical thinking and helping students. And the humanities is helping us to frame that.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Wes. That was wonderful. And just continuing to move on, next we have Faina Linkoff, who is an associate professor and chair of health administration and public health at Duquesne University. She's the only Duquesne scholar this year. Very happy to have her. And Faina will be arguing for humanities as debunkers of AI, as critical analysis of AI socially and culturally. And she has a couple of slides to share, so we're going to roll with that.
Thank you so much for having me here, John. Just one quick correction. I'm no longer the chair as of a few months ago, but other than that, I'm still around.
Congratulations then. Congratulations. I think that's a relief probably.
That's a huge relief. Yeah. So I am an associate professor here at the School of Health Sciences at the Department of Health, Exercise, and Applied Science. So next slide, please. And I'm extremely, extremely honored to be here today with colleagues who are coming from so many different disciplines. And here in this slide, I'm showing that I've been engaged in many different fields, including molecular epidemiology. I'm an epidemiologist by training, also health systems research, global health, and pedagogy. And all of those things together make me extremely sort of like curious about what is it that, what is the future of AI? How can it play with both STEM and humanities, and what can we do next to take advantage of those disciplines? And I'm extremely honored and actually privileged to be here with my colleagues today. And also, I'm glad to hear that the previous presentations that we had so far have relatively optimistic views about how we can interact with AI. And today I'll be talking about several opportunities for humanities. So next slide, please. One of the main things that I think will happen with humanities and AI is that people working in different humanities, and I'm not talking about one specific field, but multiple fields within humanities, they will be, in a way, artificial intelligence detectives that will help us to better understand how AI fits into our lives, into our science, into our research, and all kinds of life. A path. So this image was actually generated by Gemini. So what I asked it to do is I asked it to kind of develop a photo of a person in humanities serving as AI detective. And this is what it generated. So again, I was amazed with the quality of the image. I'm not sure how accurate it is. I'm not advocating for smoking, for example, but I was just really impressed with what it generated. So next slide, please. I think one of the most important things that humanities can do with AI, and what people in humanities can do with AI, is to help us understand bias that comes with AI. So for example, we can analyze systemic biases. We can critically examine the assumptions and values encoded in AI systems. We can analyze the social and cultural impact of AI systems. And again, multiple humanities, multiple disciplines within humanities can help us with that. And just to illustrate the systemic biases that AI potentially has, what I did is I first took the list of 10 top earning jobs in the US as of April 2025. So it gave me a list of professions. Then I took 5 professions out of this list, and they're here in the slide. And what I asked AI to do is to generate a typical pilot, a typical CEO, a typical orthodontist, typical surgeon, and a typical physician. And again, all of those professions were taken from that list of top earning professions. And I think basically, we are not interactive. I only was given 4 minutes because I would love to generate some discussion about what AI generated here. But what I observed here is most of these top earning professionals, they're males. They're good looking, and they're young to middle age. So we don't see women, we don't see people who are older, we don't see people who are extremely young. So this is a relatively biased view of how those professionals are supposed to look like. And I hope that people who are working in humanities would be kind of equipped to help us understand those biases. Next slide, please. I think additional thing that people in humanities can do, and not just humanities, but basically general research scientists, people in humanities, and also people in STEM, what we can all collectively do is deconstruct claims of AI capabilities. For example, we can research claims about AI's intelligence, consciousness, or agency, identify fundamental differences between human cognition and AI capabilities. And this is what I think humanities are especially well equipped to do. Dispel myth regarding general intelligence of AI tools while highlighting practical capabilities of those tools. And finally, analyze the limitations of large language models. And that's what linguists can help with. Next slide, please. Oh, by the way, in this slide, I asked the AI to kind of generate something about the future of AI, and it generated this highly technical picture. So again, I'm not sure what the future holds, but hopefully it's going to be something that is not as sort of like clean and crisp, like something that is presented in this picture. So next slide. So finally, what I want to emphasize is that humanities can help us with AI ethics, and AI ethics is a multidisciplinary field that studies how to optimize the beneficial impact of AI while reducing the risk and adverse outcomes. And where humanities scientists can potentially help, there are multiple things that they can help with. But for example, analyze the moral implications of AI development and deployment. Raise critical questions about AI accountability. So for example, if AI makes a mistake that, is medically related, is that AI fault? Is that the physician's fault? How do we determine that? Develop ethical guidelines and frameworks for AI use, ensuring that human values and rights are central to AI design and use. Next, explore privacy, autonomy, and potential for misuse of AI. Again, huge applications for that in medical care. How and where can we use it, and how can we rely or not rely on AI-based diagnostics, for example. Finally, AI's impact on civil liberties and democratic processes. And this is where political science majors can come in. But with that, I want to pause, and I want to thank everybody one more time for hosting me here and giving me opportunities. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Faina. That was wonderful. Next, we have Randall Reed, and he is the professor of religious studies at Appalachian State University, and he'll be arguing why AI makes the humanities more relevant than ever. So, Randy, hand it off to you.
The humanities have been under attack for the past 50 years. There's a joke that goes, the science student asks why it works, the engineering student asks how it works, the humanities student asks, do you want fries with that? And the point of the joke is that the job potential of humanities students is perceived to be thin. Outside of being a teacher, people often have a difficult time understanding what being a humanities major provides for students. And the reality is that humanities students are taught to be versatile thinkers who often are easily able to adapt to new challenges and therefore are successful in many walks of life. The advent of AI, however, may change this negative perception of the limited job potential of humanities grads. While the creation of large language models is the provenance of machine learning experts, the application of AI to a variety of tasks will fall to those who have exactly the skills that the humanities teach. Language models, as the name implies, engage in the currency of language. These AI models are controlled and interacted with through language. And for those students whose education has been steeped in the use and construction of thought and ideas in language, jobs related to the application of artificial intelligence are ideally suited to them. Humanities students have exactly the skill set that will be in demand in this new age of AI. Most humanities grads are comfortable in constructing their thoughts into language, since they've been trained in linguistic flexibility. Some humanities grads have experience with more than one language, and this knowledge of languages can foster a deep appreciation for the structure and syntax of language, which is a key knowledge needed to work with AI. Having completed curriculums that focus on writing and reading, most humanities majors are able to express themselves creatively in a variety of modes. Having curriculums that are enmeshed in critical thinking, they learn how to decompose and analyze problems. All of these skills are what the new age of AI in the marketplace will demand. Humanities students, as Fana just pointed out, learn how to critically examine complex social and cultural issues. Humanities students there are therefore adeptly attuned to the problems of bias and assumptions that AI may produce, which would slip past others. The students of the humanities have the skill not only to make the most of AI, but to act as guardrails against its less palatable uses and results. However, to prepare for this new world, students need to be taught not to avoid AI, but to use it responsibly and critically. They should be taught how to engage in critical thinking with regards to AI, and also to recognize the potential of AI. AI may help us address or exacerbate some of the most pressing and frightening issues of our time, from climate change to war. There's a phrase often heard that your job won't be taken by AI, but it will be taken by somebody who knows how to use AI. Humanities students are ideally suited to become part of that class of employees who are more needed and desired than ever before in our modern world. To this end, it's my conviction that the curricula in the humanities, including religious studies, needs to be designed to teach the responsible use of AI. Part of the responsible use of AI requires the recognition that AI is not perfect. AI is not a magic answer machine, and AI is also neither the coming apocalypse nor the end of all good things. AI is a technology that has certain values embedded within it: efficiency, utility, and all the biases and insights that are imparted in its training data. But AI is not necessarily constrained by those values. AI is a technology that must be critically engaged with, but engaged nonetheless. Teaching our students how to use AI in a sophisticated and responsible manner, I believe, is the task that humanities are just beginning to understand. Humanities and religious studies students in particular are precisely positioned to be the ones spearheading that much needed engagement with AI. However, it will be increasingly important to not only teach humanities students and teachers what they have to offer in the application of AI, but also to teach others in AI fields why they desperately need humanities grads before they create too many problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Randy. Very well said. Okay, the last presenter is David Witter. He is a postdoctoral fellow in the Digital Life Initiative at Cornell University. So, David, the floor is yours.
I just want to say thank you, John and Mia. The Grefenstette Center has been great, and I love the symposium too. So thanks for making all of this happen. So I'm going to be arguing how the humanities can ethically shape AI. And before I do that, I'm just going to briefly explain my own personal connection to this question, because it rather seems self-evident to me, and I was reflecting why. Wes briefly mentioned what information science is, and I'm in an information science school right now and joining one as faculty in December. But my PhD is in computer science. But as I study how people who are building AI think about the ethical impacts of what they create, I'm often borrowing from ethics and philosophy and law and anthropological methods and such. And I mean, my interest in these kind of questions makes sense. My bachelor's was in computer science and liberal arts. I'm working with a philosopher and legal scholar now. I'm a painter. My dad's an art teacher. My mom's an English teacher. So yes, humanities people can become teachers, and isn't that a great thing? So finding this sort of claim to be almost self-evident, I wasn't sure where to start. So I read a bunch of different takes on this, and then I realized that almost every humanities org has put out something explaining how humanities it can help ethically shape AI. But I'm going to focus on three, which I found most useful. One of which actually Jody briefly mentioned. So we're starting and ending with this wonderful article in the New Yorker. And what it really stuck out to me is a slightly different take than what Jody brought in. But AI is a tool. It can help us answer questions. It's really useful for that. But to learn what is worth asking is a much harder question, is something that really is a humanistic endeavor. Quoting Spivak, Burnett says that education is the non-coercive rearranging of desire, and to curate, to develop one's sensibility towards desire, towards knowing what kinds of question one wants to answer, is to me what it is to sort of be human and that curiosity. And that's not something AI can do for us. To be human is not to have answers, as Burnett says, it is to have questions. AI might help us answer these questions, but we will always need to figure out what is worth asking as humans. Secondly, learning from a grant solicitation from the National Endowment for the Humanities. Their founding legislation, the endowment's founding legislation, tasked the agency with ensuring that American people are masters of that technology and not its unthinking servants. Especially focusing on truth, trust, and democracy, safety, security, and privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties. So, and what I've found so useful about humanities approaches and scholars is how they can help create spaces to critique AI and thus shape AI. To elevate a scholar I'm particularly fond of, Lauren Goodlad at Rutgers is a comparative literature professor, and she founded the Critical AI Journal that brings a wildly interdisciplinary take for some of the best critiques of AI that I've seen. And also, I happen to be in DC right now for an advocacy event from the American Association of University Professors fighting against cuts to federal funding for education, including a massive cut to the National Endowment for the Humanities. So that's part of why I think this is so important and timely right now. Finally, from one of my favorite AI policy orgs, the Ada Lovelace Institute out of the UK, comes a wonderful blog post from a philosopher at Oxford, and challenging the sort of technological determinism here, that social, or that rather the sort of, I guess, more societal determinism. And what then he highlights is that humanities can help us unearth the normative choices inherent in AI development, who gets to make them and how as well. Also helps remind us not to reduce ethics to exactly what we should build, but the fullness of ethics, including an understanding of power dynamics, including the influence of big tech into the AI ethics space that often can reduce AI ethics into soft regulation. And an understanding of the fullness of ethics as a humanities subfield of philosophy can help us do that. And he in particular emphasizes pluralism and participation in thinking about ethics and AI. So in summary, the humanities can help ethically shape AI by helping us find what questions are worth asking, can help create spaces for critique of AI in ways that are not found in mainline AI spaces, and it can help us learn how to govern AI with more pluralistic participation.
What we're going to do now, we got about 10, 12 minutes left, is I want to actually sort of like call on each room, the sort of the leaders of each room, to give just a minute or two overview of some of the types of conversations that you were having, or any particular insights from that room that you were having. So we'll start with the rooms that I was not in. So how about room number one? We had Jody and Randy were in room number one. So can one of y'all give us some feedback from room one?
I'll go ahead. Mia was giving us, yeah, unless Randy, I'll let you add if you want at the end. We talked about, there were several things that came up. Some interesting words were like fine tuning. We started off sort of like in this technical area of like who creates what, how do we interact with AI, but also accessibility came up with those who need AI to help function and kind of connect to things they wouldn't have access to otherwise, giving different disabilities or how they function as a human person and things like that. But one thing that really kind of like, if you were to say like what the grand scope was, is that we kind of came to the conclusion that in the humanities, there really needs to more be like a general education course that's like required or offered, because we have a statistic offered that a lot of humanities students, they want to learn about AI. They want to learn how to use it ethically. How does it work? Where does it come? I would say that many of them are very lacking in knowledge of AI and how it's created, and what, I use the idea of like, sometimes I think my students think somebody just say, this is a robot, and then the robot goes on its own and has its free will and free thinking without really understanding how it's programmed by another person. And so we kind of talked about that and how beneficial that would be, is to offer more courses in the humanities where, we can go in and actually understand it, because how can you have collaboration when you don't even understand the basics of AI? And then that can also open up, interdisciplinary collaboration among our students and things like that. So Randy, I don't know if you have anything else you'd like to add. Is that good? Okay.
Randy gave you the full thumbs up, so that was fantastic. Okay, let's move on to room number two. It was Brianne and Faina. Yeah.
Similar to Jody's group, we had a big discussion on pedagogy and how we probably need to have a general education course and the curriculum for all kinds of institutions, including community colleges, four-year colleges, universities, high schools, on like ethical use of AI, how it's being generated, what it actually can or cannot do, and so on and so forth. We didn't reach any conclusions, fortunately, or still have a lot of work to do. And one issue that we touched on is the issue of clinical applications of healthcare, AI in healthcare, who is responsible for the decisions, what's already going on, what's not going on. So again, we talked about opportunities that exist in that area. And generally, we talked about sort of like the critical thinking that AI has or does not have. And we sort of kind of talked generally about the need for human curation of those tools. So Brianne, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, when we were talking about pedagogy, we talked about different ways to have students connect, such as making connections outside the classroom, assignments that are interviews, meeting people in the community, or literally handwriting in the classroom is something that pedagogically is important. We talked about the use of AI as a search engine versus thinking for you, which is, I think, a difficult and interesting line to try and draw. I think it's a productive thing to say it's good to use it as a search engine, especially if you have the expertise to be able to authenticate whatever it is you're finding. And that's obviously not necessarily having it think for you. So it was a good complication of my thesis, I thought. And then finally, we talked about how to help students prudently and virtuously use AI, which I think got us around into a conversation about ultimately the importance of relationships. In other words, like, what do relationships offer that AI doesn't? And just how much, this is kind of my thing I've been thinking about, but just how much we just let how we think of AI define how we think of what we should expect of our human relationships, but how much we need to educate people and have a discourse about what is value about our human relationships that is in excess of what we can expect from AI. So that includes teachers. Somebody brought up the way that, teachers are responsible for that, and the way that sometimes it's not so much the content, but the relationship itself that is the teacher that is so important. And I would say the same things in some ways true of parents, right? Like, the reason a parent is effective is because of the relationship that they have with their kid, not just the stuff that they're telling you to think or do or whatever. The relationship is more important. Same with friends and with colleagues, right? Like a conversation with a colleague can be more challenging and helpful in brainstorming than, than a chat GPT discourse, I think. So, teaching people to be able to articulate the value of relationships and think about how those are valuable in ways that AI, while helpful, maybe can't do those things. So those were some of the great conversations we had in our group. And I appreciate Faina talking about the clinical aspect, which I could not.
Perfect. Awesome. Okay, then we'll go to room number 3. Wes or David, do you want to take the lead there?
We started by talking about curiosity and when students are excited to learn and when they aren't, and how AI can make it easier for folks who aren't to not, and then the virtue of or how and when and whether to use software to try and catch students using AI, and how how to generally motivate students to sort of curate their own sense of curiosity. And we ended up talking about how theology and religion can help us think about AI, including forming some either developing one's own sense of ethics towards their work and their views, or as a lens, a sort of an analytical lens to approach these questions themselves. And particularly had some good contributions from Kate out there. Wes, what'd I miss?
I think you covered most of it. We also talked about like differentiating between like knowledge and wisdom, and that's where, some of our religious traditions can help us to help students to kind of make that distinction. And where where AI might be on the wisdom generation, if it's able to generate wisdom or only able to generate information or knowledge. And we don't, clearly don't have an answer to that, but that was part of our discussion.
Thanks for watching our video. Be sure to visit our website at duq.edu/ethics and sign up for our mailing list to be notified of future events and opportunities.